All right, the long anticipated, at least by me, sewing box video. Sewing boxes are one of my very favorite things. Like any collection of tools, they give us a little peek into who their owners were, what was important to them, what their interests were, and even a little bit about their daily lives as a daughter or a wife or a mother or a homemaker or an artist or any and all of these things combined. I don't have a huge collection. I have about a dozen or so, but I will walk you through each of them, starting with the most recent to the oldest, just because the oldest two are my favorites, and I kind of want to end with that as the grand finale. So starting with maybe the 1890s, 1900s, and then working my way back to about the 1820s or 30s. So let's get started. I'll start with the smallest. I think this is from the late Victorian era, maybe 1880s, somewhere around there. I was drawn to this one by the interior and also by all of this wooden trim across the front. It also would have had it along the bottom, but that has since disappeared. It probably also would have had little feet. It's missing a couple corners, which is one of the things I like about these boxes. Of course, pristine boxes are beautiful, but when they show that someone actually used them, that they were actually involved in a household, I think that adds a whole lot more worth to it than just the perfect, untouched version that clearly nobody actually liked or used when it was purchased new. It's missing this part around the keyhole, probably a mother of pearl, and like I said, some trim around the corners. Inside, though, is beautiful. So this is all obviously the original red. I love how this part is still in really good condition. You can see all the patterns, the flower pattern that's in the fabric, the embossed leather. It hasn't shattered. It's just absolutely gorgeous. It has a removable tray, and your work would go down here. So whatever it is you were working on, a piece of embroidery or some small repair or something like that, would be in the bottom. And then in the top is where you would keep all your tools. Now all of these little compartments would have had things. These little square ones would have held spools. I have a thread waxer and a needle sharpener, probably would have gone somewhere here in the front, perhaps in the back. But that also could have been for more threads. Things like tools would have gone there in front. This little spot here is a thimble bed. It's got a little recess in it to hold your thimbles. A pin cushion here in the front. This is a needle book. So you would just put your needles here on these pages and then keep it in this slot here. This would be a little covered box to put things like buttons and hooks and smaller things that you didn't want to fly around. And so that's how this box would have been kitted out when it was new or being used and had all its pieces in it. I love how in relatively good shape it is. Just a beautiful little box. Next is this one. I believe this one is oak. What drew me to this one was this amazing brass inlay. Again, very beautiful. It's missing a little bit of the brass here in the front, but that didn't deter me. I thought it was gorgeous. When you open it up, absolutely awesome color. I loved the green color. It's got like a blue in the background and the green in the front. The silk is shattering pretty badly, but I keep them very temperature controlled and climate controlled, and so it will last as long as it lasts. This green embossed I thought was just gorgeous. The kind of sage green and gold is so pretty. So this little area up here has a little clasp so that it can open. People say that they're for patterns. I don't know. I don't think it's not really big enough for patterns. I think it's for any little kind of notes or papers or keepsakes, things like that that you would keep in them. And there's a little groove here in the lid. The clasp tightens up so it doesn't come out. these front slats of the tray are loose, and I'll probably fix those up. It's also missing a couple, but for the most part, this tray is a very solid little tray. Has a nice little carving around it with some use marks on it, which always makes me happy to see. Inside is this beautiful turquoisey blue color. And this one didn't have anything that really came with it. No pincushion, no little lids or anything like that. But it does have this little mat, and this little mat is very cool because there are some myths that the stitches per inch, when Victorian sewing books would talk about doing 40 or 50 or 60 stitches per inch, that was not accurate, something to shoot for that nobody actually did, you know, that kind of a thing. But I disagree, just because it isn't in common practice today and the needle sizings have gotten bigger today. I'll show you some needles in another box coming up. But the stitching around here is some of the smallest hand stitching I've ever seen. This running stitch is fairly normal, but these stitches along the ends are absolutely minuscule. This wouldn't have been original. This is an addition by one of the owners. But yeah, really beautiful stitching. And the color matches perfectly, so it definitely gets to live there. So yeah, if you were going to kit out this box, I would say that your spools would probably live in these compartments. You would have your tools in the middle here, and then little boxes for different things. Very beautiful box. I love the way the mother of pearl accents this blue and green color. Then this amazing box. This isn't an inlay, this is like an overlay, but it is also brass, and it's amazing. It's a viney, grapey pattern just all over it, on the sides, the front, and the other side. The back doesn't have any, but what an amazing decoration on this box. The top is just covered in these overlays of vining grapes. And then in the front, there's a beautiful piece here of the grapes and the leaves over the lock. And the overlays weren't just flat and then hammered down over the corners. They were designed with this solid section here that would go on the corners, making it very, very strong. Inside, look at the blue satin. When I opened it up, I was surprised by the blue. I don't know why. I don't know what color I thought it should have, but you have all of this warm brass and burl wood and all this stuff, and then you open it up, and it's this rich royal blue with mother of pearl accents and a silver paper lined tray. So this one has 2 pincushions in the back. The pincushions are, the silk is shattered on the pincushions because obviously it was used, and so the fabric on the pincushions is the first to go. But these 2 are pincushions. Then you have 2 little areas here that are silver paper lined, and they would be holding your little packs of needles, buttons, hooks, those kinds of things. In the center here is a tape measure. The tape measure is in there, but I don't really want to fish it out for fear of cracking the case or tearing the tape measure. So I don't know, I may someday, but it's the same button top as here. There would have been a set of spool holders like these that would have gone in the back here, and they also would have been topped with this same button. This is kind of a common pattern. You'll see this around if you go looking for antique sewing box tools. You'll see this pattern with the flower in the middle and the stars on the outside. It has 2 thimble beds here in the front with the divots for the thimbles. This is a nice heavy silver thimble, and then there's also a mother of pearl thimble. This flat spot here is where you would have put your tools. Trying to be very careful so I don't tear it. So your tools would have gone in there. And then underneath it is another section. These came with the box. I don't think that they're original. There's a nice silver bodkin here It could have been, I suppose. But other than that, there's some kind of large leather needles. But they came with a box, and so they are part of this box's legacy. And so I'll keep it, I'll keep them in there. And then that's how that would fit. Again, it has this clasp in the top that would spin, allowing you to open it with the little sleeve for paper and keepsakes and things. So very lovely little box, very grand, and a beautiful example of just a heavy, stately sewing box. Okay, so the next one I have is a little bit earlier, and this one has beautiful mother of pearl details on it. The mother of pearl accents are probably my favorite. I just love the contrast between the mother of pearl and the old wood. So this one has some little floral accents in the corners. Just kind of a plain back and sides with a little bit in the front. Now, looking inside, this one is a little rough, but it's one of my favorites. This little latch, whoops. This little latch would have gone up here to hold it, but I think that this is a mixture of two sewing boxes. I don't think that the pink tray and the lid are original, because this certainly would have gone up here. You can see the marks that it's been there a very long time. However, there is no groove in the wood where it would slip in to hold it, and this is very much glued in. It's not coming out. The button wouldn't be able to function. Also, this tray, it fits side to side very well, but front to back, it's actually about 1/4 of an inch short, which I don't think would have been in the original. But nevertheless, this one, okay, so let's see, where should I start? There's a couple things. So it has these awesome little old scissors, just absolutely gorgeous, very old. It has a little shelf in the front with the same kind of sloping divots that the thimbles would be resting on. These are loose. That's where the needle books would have gone. This would have set up there like that. You have your spaces back here for spools. That would have sat in there. There's an old tape measure. And a not necessarily old thimble. So this is the pin cushion over on this side. Like I said, needle books would go here, small things under there. This actually would have had the scissors go underneath it, but because it's kind of falling apart, I don't want to risk ripping it completely. The thimble bed there. Now this little compartment has some things. These have the tiniest needles. So what does this say? This says manufactured and warranted by H. Millward and Sons, Washford Needle Mills, England. And inside are the tiniest hand needles. So tiny. Look at how thin those are. Look at how tiny the eyes are. I don't think that I'm going to be able to pick it up on camera, but the eyes of these needles are so tiny. And again, it gets into that idea of, oh, I'm sure that they didn't sew really tiny stitches back in ye olden days because I can't do it now. Look how small these needles are, how small the stitches in that other box were. I just absolutely love it. So number 10 sharps are these little tiny ones. Number 10 sharps now are not this small and don't have that size of an eye. This one also. Number 10s, Phoenix Works, Redditch, Harper's Superior Helix needles. They're called betweens, so they're not sharps, they're betweens. Again, so tiny. Look at how small that is. I'll try and take some close-ups, but the camera's not going to be able to pick up that eye of that needle. It's so tiny. And that's how you would make those really tiny stitches, is with really tiny needles. They're just absolutely beautiful. And the fact that these were kept well enough that they're not all rusted is awesome. I love that. Tatting shuttle, even though it's broken, it's still a beautiful bone tatting shuttle. Open ends, which means it's a pretty old one, but beautiful shuttle. Then underneath it, so let's put this back. Oh, okay. So then underneath here is writing, which is a historian's favorite thing. When you find some personalized handwriting, especially when it has a date. So it's very light pencil. I put it through a couple different photographic filters and resolutions and things, and the best I can think of, or the best I can make out, is that it has somebody's name, and then it has birthday wishes and the date 1854. The problem with 1854 is that I don't think that this outer box is an 1854 box. I think this is more like 1870s, 1880s. But that kind of lends credence to why the tray doesn't fit perfectly. When I bought this, I thought it was just, you know, kind of a random box. It wasn't very expensive, and it's not like the fanciest one that you could find. But I like to ask the sellers if they have any provenance with it, if they have any stories of where it came from, who it came from. Sometimes you'll get made up stories like, oh, this belonged to my great grandmother's sister who was a duchess, or some kind of like goofball answers. But this one didn't. This one had a very nice story, and the seller said it belonged to a friend of their mother's, I think, who was still alive, and that they would reach out to this woman and see if she would be interested in contacting me and telling me a little bit about herself and her box, and kind of put a history along with it. And she did. And so I got an email from her, and it was the sweetest thing. And I'm so grateful. And so I have that printed out, and I will keep it with this box. It's very delicate, and it has a story, and it has the writing on the inside. So again, this won't be a daily use box. This will be a collected box. But absolutely beautiful. And then, you know, it has some kind of the things like more modern stuff like hem tape and a little manicure set. That's, you know, it's not as old as the box, but the longer we keep it, the older it gets. But anyway, that's part of this box's story anyway. And because I'm not going to use it as a daily driver, I don't feel the need to empty it out or anything like that. So there is this beautiful box, and it's one of my favorites. Just, it's a very humble little box. It's missing some of the edges. It's missing its pewter or whatever it is that's inlaid here. But I love that it's mother of pearl. I like the size. And I love that it has a story, and that I actually got to, through emails, meet one of the original owners and hear about the original owners. So that makes this box very special to me. The next one is a shaker box. So shaker boxes are very popular, and I only have the one. They don't speak to me quite as much as the more, I don't know, ornate or fancy sewing boxes. They're still beautiful. This has been refinished. Originally, you would have been able to see the woodwork a little better. You know, these joints are gorgeous. You can tell that they were absolutely amazing craftsmen. Beautiful box. And yeah, it's a shame that it was recovered, but I don't know, maybe someday I'll strip it and you can see the original woodwork on it. Inside, it has this marbled paper, which would be the original marbled paper. Again, this is kind of getting into the mid 1800s now. So we're going backwards in time. So this would be, I think, I'm not there. Shaker boxes have a huge following, and people can look at the marbling on the paper and can look at the color scheme and know like exactly what part of the country it was, what group of people built it, when its actual date is, and all that kind of stuff. I unfortunately am not one of those people. I just kind of like have been able to learn a little bit from interviewing some of the people who are that educated in shaker boxes. But this is still a pretty one. I like that it has its original orange and blue, which is kind of one of those things where because things fade, we tend to think of the 1800s as being a rather sienna, parchment, kind of brown on brown century. But no, they had some crazy color schemes going on in the 1800s. And this is kind of one of them. This very, very bold orange and blue, which would have been original. It would have had a tray, but the tray was not there. But yeah, this orange and blue, and it's plaid with the marbled paper and the orange trim and the blue interior. It's a very exciting box. So anyway, that is my shaker contribution to my collection. This one's fun. I loved the top. The whole woodwork inlay on the top is just beautiful. When I got it, I was a little afraid that it was modern, because I thought that it looked like a very modern inlay, but I was able to date it to the 1860s, and so I know that it's not. It's just a very, very classic floral design that has not gotten out of style. Other than that, there's no real decorations on the box. It still has its... I'm losing some of the tops now. It still has its trim along the bottom, which is fun. Often these get broken off, but this one still has it. When we open it up, it's just wood on the inside. Lots of little box covers. So when I got this, it was just plain, and I added the green. I put a liner in here, and I lined the bottoms because they were just wood. But I do love all the compartments. This was my daily driver for a long time. It's very, very functional. It has all of these little compartments. You can put so much stuff in it. I had a row of spools in there. Just so much space, and it was really nice. The problem was it was a little big, and I couldn't carry it with me. If you've seen the one of my current sewing box that I've had for a couple years now, it's big enough to hold everything I use, but small enough for me to actually pick it up and move it like from location to location. This was just too big, and it lived here on the table. And so it meant that I only used it when I was sewing here at the table, which isn't a bad thing, but anyway, that's its story. Underneath the tray is a nice big wooden compartment. Just lovely in there. I like all the wood on here. It's just beautiful. So this part wasn't original. This was originally just a wooden opening, and it had this pincushion in the middle. But this is a huge user of space. Like, you're just going to use a couple pins in there, and then other than that, it's a pretty solid block of wood. Underneath it, however, was writing, and that is very helpful because it allowed me to date and place where it was made. And according to translation sites, the writing is Portuguese, and it allowed me to look up antique sewing boxes made in Portugal. And apparently there was a pretty thriving industry in the mid-1800s, and I was looking at the floral inlay on the top. They went through kind of different phases, and this matches almost perfectly with the 1860s model of sewing boxes that were coming out of Portugal for British tourists to Spain and France and Italy and around those like surrounding areas, mostly to Spain. So yeah, they would make them in Portugal and sell them to British tourists who were visiting Spain. And I think that's, I don't know, it's pretty funny. Again, it's just part of its story. And then it ended up, I bought it from an antiques dealer in Britain, I think, if I remember correctly. So presumably it got picked up in the 1860s and went to England and never came back. So yeah, that's this beautiful one. The flowers are absolutely gorgeous. A big solid tabletop sewing box with all the little wooden compartments. The last stop on my sewing box collection journey is the sarcophagus shaped boxes. These boxes date to the 1820s to 1830s. This one's a little older than this one, but they're both very beautiful. And this specific silhouette with the knobs on the side is very indicative of that time period. I really like how different they look. This one is a little more sedate. It has just the carving around the outside and a little mother of pearl inlay here. This one is my daily driver, and I love how whimsical it is with the big floppy flowers and the brass inlay that's just a bunch of scroll work all over it. In the front too, I love how whimsical this is. I'll just open this one up for a second, but I did make a whole video walking through. This is my daily driver sewing box. I have one of my grandmother's teacups. It's chipped pretty badly, so we'll never drink out of it, but that's what holds little thread scraps. I have a tin with snaps and safety pins and stuff like that. This is where all of my spools go of colors that I use. I don't use the old thread because old thread is notoriously brittle, but I do take the old spool and rewind thread onto it. Egg cup pincushion, thread that I use for tatting, some scissors. This is where the thread waxer and the old pincushion live, is in that little box there. I have these little tools, the hooks and the awls. Underneath it, I have tatting shuttles. And underneath that, I have crochet hooks and longer things like that. This tray took me forever to make because it's all out of paper, and I wanted it specifically to have a ton of little secret compartments. So I have my needle books live under that compartment. It also needed to be deep enough to hold my egg cup pincushion. Under this one has random things like extra thimbles, a doll shoe, another pair of scissors, buttons, things like that. And then underneath it, I do not follow historical suit. I should, and I think it would make it easier to use, but I have extra stuff. I have more thread, I have pinking shears, I have extra box of pins, I have extra needles, all of these kinds of things that don't fit in the top and I don't use quite as often live in the bottom. So I don't get into the bottom very much because everything that I need to sew daily is here on the top. Anyway, like I said, if you want more stories or kind of a longer version of what's in my sewing box, I do have a separate video for that. But getting into this one is an exciting one because it came loaded, and I don't have a lot of sewing boxes. Some of the boxes that we've seen were, had some things in it, but this one has a set and it's gorgeous. I mean, look at that. The color scheme alone sold me on it. It was like this beautiful pink and green. I don't know originally if it was pink and green, but it is now, and it's so beautiful. This pinky color is such a nice color with the wood. I love the old green stamped leather on it. I love that the rest of it is all stamped leather of the same stuff. It's like, I mean, it's amazing. It still has pieces in it. It's just, this is one that I get really excited about. So it's got its 2 pincushions. It's got some needle books in it. I'll take this one out because it's bent on the top, it's easier to get out. But yeah, it has little needle books. It doesn't have the felt inside, but those are still the same little stamped leather needle books. Just so gorgeous. It has the thimble beds that are embossed, and they have the embossing in them. So this is where you would have put your scissors and your little hooks and awls and things Of course, they probably would have been the original bone. This lifts up to another compartment. Now, in the back here, we have the original spool winders. The bottom piece is bone, but it's ivory on the top. And isn't that an absolutely gorgeous design carved into that? It's so delicate and beautiful. And there is a whole set of them, which is hard to find. One of the ways you can date a spool, if you're looking for them, is that these were designed to have the thread actually wrapped around them, whereas these were designed to fit into a spool. You can still do that on these, but the post is so thick. So this is what the post looks like on one of the late Victorian ones. Having the bone or ivory post and having it be so thick is specific to the very, very earlier ones. The metal ones that are thinner that would go through a wooden spool are much later. Still antique, still 1800s, but later in the 1800s. This would have been early in the 1800s or even late 1700s. But yeah, they're just beautiful, and they're all here and they're not broken. So beautiful. And then what else? So then we have a little tape measure that is missing one of the ends, and a needle case. And then a second needle book. And then it has this like metal trim along the entire tray. It's just an absolutely beautiful piece. Underneath it, it's kind of this lavender color, and some of the trim that has broken off, it has, that fits in here. I have another piece that's supposed to be on here too. So I have to be careful not to break those. But yeah, just like this kind of purpley interior. But I love this one. I love the very, very light pinky purple color with the green. So beautiful. And it has that sarcophagus shape. It has the knobs for carrying on the sides. This one doesn't look like it would have had feet. So it's almost complete. It's just so beautiful. Now, not quite the same as the other boxes is this style. This would be just the tools, and they have a special name, and I've only read them. I have no idea how it's pronounced, so I'm not going to try. But these can be found as well. This one would also be late 1800s, and it would have tools in it. So you wouldn't put your projects, you wouldn't put your threads, you would just have the tools. It has bodkins, needle cases, the same button hook or boot hook, regular hook, tweezers, stiletto, another bodkin. And this is a file with a sharp punch on the end. This is an antique seam ripper. It's just a little pocket knife. There's a little blade inside. It's very thin. And instead of having, the modern seam ripper, so instead of like a modern seam ripper where you have your hook and your little sharp spot in there, they would just have a very thin knife, and you would just kind of run underneath the thread and slice the thread. Old scissors, a whole assortment of needles. And so this is a very nice and useful thing, because then this can sit in a mending basket. So in that case, you would have a basket or a larger box that would have your projects, larger mending, that kind of a thing. And then this would just go into there to pull out and use, and you would have your mending projects and sewing projects with their threads in a larger basket. So these are a beautiful thing to find as well. So that is my collection of sewing boxes. I love how tied into people's everyday lives they were. I know mine doesn't revolve around my sewing box, but the sewing box is very integral in helping me perform my tasks throughout the day. It's a place to go to when I have some extra time. It's a place to go to when I need to fix something. And sewing boxes just have so much history, and they're so diverse. I mean, once you get past that there are boxes with sewing stuff inside. The sizes, the inlays, their layouts, the equipment they have, and so much about them is specific and customized to their owners. No two sewing boxes are the same, and no two boxes are filled with the same equipment. Something I like to do is look for sewing boxes in TV shows and movies. Downton Abbey has a lot downstairs. They don't have a ton of boxes upstairs, but they have quite a few downstairs. Emma Thompson's Sense and Sensibility movie, she has a beautiful sewing box, and you get to see it maybe 3 or 4 times in the movie. Gilded Age has a ton of sewing boxes. They don't have a lot downstairs, but one of the main characters, Miss Ada, likes to sew. And so they're able to showcase a bunch of different types of sewing boxes and tool cases and things. So that's a really good one to look for them too. I don't know, do any of you do that too? If you do, let me know what movies and TV shows I'm missing that have sewing boxes featured somewhere in them. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed coming on this journey through time and through sewing boxes with me. And until next time, thank you for watching. Bye!